Well, good morning. Last week when we left off, we were starting the story of Jacob and Esau. And these are two twin brothers literally born in conflict with each other. From the womb, they were fighting each other. And even at birth, they were fighting each other. And their conflict destroyed their relationship. It destroyed their relationship with each other, their relationship with God, even in part their relationship with their parents. And it almost destroyed their life. When we left off last week, Esau was literally planning to kill Jacob. And Jacob has to run for his life. How did we go from that? How did we go from that place to chapter 33? How did we go from nearly killing each other to hating each other, from stealing from each other, to blessing each other, showing kindness to each other, and love to each other? Genesis chapter 33 is an amazing story. I mean, the story of Jacob and Esau is just a wonderful story of two brothers who spend almost all of their life fighting each other, but who come back together and reconcile and live in peace. It's an amazing story. How do we see that in our life? How can we see this story? How can we achieve this type of peace in our own life? What can we do to reconcile with some of the people that we know that we have broken, messy, hurtful, painful relationships with? What can we learn from this story? Because I know that some of us are dealing with this kind of conflict right now. We're dealing with challenging relationships, challenging people. We're dealing with some family members, people that we love dearly, that we care about a great deal. And there have been things that have been done in the past and said in the past, maybe by ourselves, maybe by them, that have destroyed the relationship that we have. And wouldn't it be a miracle? Wouldn't it be amazing if one day we could embrace them like Jacob and Esau and resolve our conflict and be at peace with them? I want to look and learn from this story. And my hope is that what we learn we can apply to our lives. Last week we looked at the conflict, and if you remember, we saw within the conflict God was working through all of it, but we didn't see any end to the conflict. This morning I want to look at this resolution, how they've resolved this conflict, and I want to look what we can learn from it and take it into our lives as well. But before we dive into Genesis 33, before we see exactly what Jacob and Esau did in order to reconcile their conflict, we have to talk about what has caused this life change in Jacob. We have to take a moment and consider the source for the reconciliation, because it's pretty clear that Jacob that we see in Genesis 33 is not the Jacob that we've read about, that we've been hearing about. He's not the trickster, he's not the liar, he's not the thief, he's not the guy that's taking from his brother. This is a very, very different guy. And when we flip back, and we're going to do so very, very, very quickly, but I want to make some notes here. There have been three events that have occurred in Jacob's life that have changed him. There have been three major events. The first is in Genesis chapter 28. Jacob has a dream. He has a dream in which God basically shows him the promises that he has for him. And then the second thing that occurs is Jacob has a very long and terrible experience with his uncle Laban. And along the process, he gets married, and it's a huge headache. We're not going to dive into that story. But basically, he meets his own fellow trickster. And throughout that experience, it's a difficult experience for him, but he begins to see God's promises show up into his life. But even after all of that, it doesn't explain the Jacob that we meet in chapter 33. God calls him from that place to go back home. So he knows he's going to have to deal with Esau. He knows he's going to have to deal with Esau. He's following God's plan for his life, but he knows it's going to bring him square on with his brother. And he hears that his brother's coming, and we find a Jacob who is afraid, who is scared, who's trying to find a way around Esau. And the third and final most significant event, the most significant event of Jacob's life. And it's an event we're actually going to look at next week. So we're kind of going a little bit out of order. We'll go next week and look back. But literally the day before he meets Esau, or the night before rather, he has this incredible encounter with God in which he wrestles with God. He's the first man to have a wrestling match with God. And he's, well, sort of victorious. And he leaves this incredible encounter with God a transformed and a changed man. So when we look at Genesis 33, and we look at this relationship of brothers who spent their whole life fighting each other and then reconcile and embrace, we have to realize that what has occurred here is that God has changed their heart. God's changed their heart. God, at least with Jacob, we don't know much about Esau's story, but we know that God has changed Jacob's heart. And this is so important for us when we think about the conflicts that we're facing. Conflict resolution is not step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. I'm not saying that steps don't help and actions don't help. They do, and we're going to give a couple. But it starts with a changed heart. It starts with you as a person changing. If you just try to apply a couple steps to conflict, here's what will happen. You might resolve one conflict. But what you'll end up finding out is you won't live in peace. Because you'll fix that conflict, and then next week, something else will divide you. It starts with a changed heart. We have to change. God has to change our heart before we can start to live out what we see in between Jacob and Esau in chapter 33. And as we look at this reconciliation, it's his relationship with God that inspires, I believe, the actions that we see here. And so we're looking at the story. We're looking at Genesis chapter 33. It's what Jose read. If you have your Bibles, I invite you to open to it. And what we see here is not just actions. We see a changed man. We see a changed man. And the three things that I'm going to point out flow from his changed heart. They flow from Jacob's experience with God and how he's been changed. And I think that all three of these, if we have a relationship with God and we're struggling with conflict with somebody else, I think all three of these will be helpful and we should consider applying to our own life. The first thing that we see, and this is the most immediate change in the heart of Jacob, because the day before Jacob heard, he heard that Esau is coming. So remember, last time that Jacob has seen his brother, they didn't leave hugging each other. They didn't leave in an embrace. He took off running, and his brother was planning to kill him. So now he's approaching back into the promised land, and he hears that his brother is coming to meet him. Oh, but it's not just Esau. Esau's coming with 400 men. And so immediately what we hear right before this story is Jacob is terrified. He is absolutely terrified, and he does a number of things. He does a number of things to help prepare for this. First of all, he splits his family up, because in his thinking, when Esau arrives, only half of us will get killed. So he'll go for that half, and the other half will get out. And then he begins to launch presents at Esau. He just sends servants to Esau with cattle and livestock and wealth. He starts launching presents. And if you're married, you might understand this a little bit, because this may have happened to you, where you've done something wrong. All right, you've done something wrong, and so you are making a preemptive strike in which you are sending maybe flowers or jewelry, or you're preparing something to help out of fear. You didn't just go out and get it, right? You're out of fear responding. Well, that's where we see Jacob before he runs into Esau. Then he has this encounter with God, and the very first thing that we see, and one of the most important things in our lives when it comes to conflict resolution, is courage. If you want to resolve conflict, you must have courage. And before Jacob encountered God, he had no courage. He was terrified. And then we find here in Genesis 33, Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau's coming, 400 men with him. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the two female servants, and he puts the servants with their children in front, and then Leah with her children, and Rachel and Joseph last of all. He himself went on before them. You hear that? Jacob, he's got all of his family there. He goes out and goes to Esau. He meets him man to man, face to face. This is so important. It's so important when we talk about conflict. If you are afraid to address it, if you are afraid to handle it, if you are afraid to face it, it is impossible. It is impossible for the conflict to be settled. If Jacob had not been willing to go out there, if he had been just kept launching servants and going in the opposite direction or trying to go around, he would have never experienced this moment. He has to go out and face his brother. Is it scary? Yes. It is very scary. He literally could be killed here. That is his fear. He is afraid his brother is going to kill him. He has every reason to be afraid. The last time he saw his brother's planning to kill him. His brother's coming with 400 men. Why does he need 400 men? You could imagine he's coming to kill him. He's terrified. And yet, despite that, he presses forward. You know, there's a quote by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and I think it's a good one. Courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the assessment that something else is more important than the fear. There's no doubt that Jacob was afraid at this moment. It doesn't say that he was, but seeing where he was before he encountered God, we can guess that he's still feeling inside fear. But Jacob has made an assessment. I think what's most important to him at this moment is actually not his brother, though that may play a part into it. What's most important to Jacob is the calling of God on his life. God has called him to go to the promised land. A part of that calling means he must reconcile with his brother. That's probably a lot of our conflicts. There's something in which we must do. It may not be out of love for someone else, but there's something that we must do at our workplace or with our family, and in order to get through that, we've got to be reconciled. Well, the calling here for Jacob is to go to where God has called him to. That's what's most important in his life. And along with that, he must be reconciled with his brother. And all of his fear that was sort of holding him back before he had encountered God, all of the things that he's thinking through, they're real. But God's call for his life is most important. And when we look at some of the conflict that we're facing, if it's a conflict at work or a conflict at church, we might have to think the same way. Is what I'm trying to accomplish more important than this conflict? Am I willing to resolve it in order to serve my workplace or to serve God or to whatever? And I think the same way we should think about our relationships. Is my brother more important than my fear of dealing with this conflict? Is my spouse, is my marriage, is my child, is it more important than the fear that I'm feeling dealing with this? And I want to be honest, I think a lot of us, just like Jacob is feeling fear, there's a lot of fear and uncertainty in a lot of our conflict. Some of our conflict is probably very long-lasting. It's probably been going on for 5, 10, 15 years. And maybe like Jacob, we haven't spoken to that person in a very long time. I imagine that probably most of our conflict is very painful. Maybe we did something that was very painful, or maybe the person that we have conflict with us has done something very painful, very hurtful. They may have said certain things or done certain things, and the last thing in the world we want to do is face them face to face and deal with it. But the reality is, unless we have courage, there will be no resolution to conflict. We will not find peace in our relationship. It's Jacob's courage that allows him to have this opportunity. If he would not have had it, this would never have occurred. He probably would have never left the land that he was at. He would have never left where Laban was. His courage allows him to have reconciliation. The second thing pairs with it, and that's his humility. Now, if courage is the most immediate change that occurred in his life, it's humility that's the most amazing change, because everything that we know about Jacob is that he is not a very humble person. All right, he steals his brother's birthright. He then lies to his father to steal the blessing of his brother. He has done nothing in his life that would imply that he is a very humble person. And yet, here we find him, chapter 33, verse 3. He himself went on before them, and he's bowing to the ground 7 times. 7 times he bows to the ground. Now, in any culture, and especially this culture, getting down on the ground before someone, that's a very humble act. That's an act of submission. And if you remember the oracle that God prophesied over these 2 brothers, it's Esau that's supposed to be submitting to Jacob. And Jacob has lived that out. He's basically put that to heart. But not here. Here, for the first time, Jacob approaches his older brother, and he's humble to him. He gets down and he bows before him. This is a changed man. I go back to that again. Why is Jacob acting like this? He's a changed man. The guy that he was growing up, the boy that he was, the guy that would take advantage of his brother and then steal his brother's blessing, that's not this guy. That's not him. Jacob is humble. And we see that in how he approaches his brother. Now, humility, we need to understand what humility is. Humility is not losing the argument. Jacob is still the chosen one. Matter of fact, that just before this, Jacob's name is changed to Israel. He will be the father of God's people. He's still the chosen one. He is still the higher brother. That's not what humility is. It's not about who wins or who. It's about honoring the other person and respecting them. There's a popular quote. It's kind of funny. I was thinking of this quote. I used to have it in my office. It's humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. I used to think this was a C.S. Lewis quote for the longest time. And then I was Googling it this week and found out that it's just been falsely attributed to C.S. Lewis. So all this time I thought it was a C.S. Lewis quote, and it was on my office bulletin board for a long time. But it's a good quote. It's a good quote. As it turns out, it's been said by many men at many different times. And it's a good way to think about humility. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's not thinking of yourself as unworthy. It's not groveling before people. It's simply not thinking of yourself and thinking of the other person. And I think in a lot of the conflicts that we deal with, we have to, if we have any hope in reconciling the conflict, we have to stop focusing on us. And I get it. Probably in a lot of our conflicts, at least in a lot of my conflicts, I'm always right. I don't know if that's been the case with you, but in all of my conflicts, I'm always right. My wife can tell you, we've had numerous arguments, and I've never been wrong in any of the arguments. And we're right. And what that person did, you won't believe what they did to me, and you won't believe. But that's not what humility is. Humility is honoring them and respecting them. In Jacob's culture, bowing down before his older brother was how you did that. And throughout the conversation, when he speaks to his brother, he calls him Lord. That's honoring him. He's respecting him. He even actually says to him, and this is a part of what's going on, he even says, because he says to him towards the end of the conversation, and this is verse 10, "For I have seen your face, which is like seeing the face of God, and you have accepted me." Well, back up a little bit, and we'll look at this more next week, but when he wrestles with God, he sees God's face. Now he sees his brother, and he says, "Your face is like the face of God." Well, he's not saying his brother looks like God. Matter of fact, if you remember the description of Esau, that wouldn't make any sense. That'd be odd. He's making a comparison. The way that Esau has treated him, his kindness and his respect, is like how God has treated Jacob. He's honoring him. He honors his brother. His whole life he has spent attacking his brother, taking from his brother, putting his foot over his brother, lowering his brother. And at this moment, when he approaches his brother for the first time, he humbles himself and he honors him and he respects him. I think in a lot of the conflict that we're dealing with, we're not going to get anywhere unless we humble ourselves with the other person. And I'm not saying that that they deserve it. They may not. Maybe you are right. Maybe what they did to you was terrible. But we're going to have to let go of our pride and approach them with courage and humility, or there's probably no hope of reconciliation. Now, we could look at this, and there's a number of factors. One of the factors being Esau, of course, and there's a number of other things going on. And for whatever it is, here's the deal. It worked. It worked. Jacob approaches Esau with courage, and he approaches him with humility. And maybe Esau was going to forgive him no matter what. I don't know, maybe. But I have to think it helped. It worked. Esau runs to meet him, and he embraces him. I mean, it's like these guys, it's like when they left off, they were like the best buds ever. And here they run at each other. They embrace each other. There's an incredible just moment of really a sweet moment of reconciliation. And these two brothers who have spent their whole lives apart for the first time ever are actually united. They're in peace. And there's one final attribute, one final thing we see in this reconciliation, and it's the most significant. And I say it's the most significant because we know that this is evidence that there really has been life change. Because knowing Jacob, we could say that his courage and his humility is just another one of his tricks. I don't know if you've ever ran into that with somebody where they treat you kindly and they're humble to you, but they're just trying to take advantage of you. It could be another one of those tricks. But the reason that we know it's not a trick is at this moment, everybody knows that they're good. Esau's hugged him. They're good. Their relationship is healed. And yet, we see incredible generosity, really by both brothers. By both brothers. Esau, afterwards, the first thing he asks him, he's like, hey, what's up? I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, what's up with all the stuff you've been sending me? And basically, if you follow along here, Jacob tells him that he's trying to bless him. And Esau tells his brother, you don't need to do it. He says to him, you don't need to do it. I'm good. And if Jacob had not been a changed man, at that moment he would have said, okay, I'll take it all back. Right? But that's not what he does. That's not what he does. He says to him, no, please. This is verse 10. Jacob said, no, please. If I have found favor in your sight, then accept my present from my hand. For I have seen your face, which is like seeing the face of God, and you have accepted me. Please accept my blessing that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough. Thus he urged him, and he took it. Did you catch the motivation for this? God has dealt graciously with me. Take my blessing. Now, Jacob is generous, but let's be clear here. This is really restitution. He's paying back what he has stolen from his brother. See, he says, I'm going to bless you. Well, remember what it was that caused them to go their separate ways? What nearly got them killed? Jacob stole the blessing from his brother. And so here he looks at his brother and he says, take my blessing. The most generous one really is Esau, because it seems that Esau didn't really care, that Esau was okay with just going without. He didn't need to have it repaid. He would have been just fine the way it is. And so Esau, both Esau and Jacob, though, we see generosity. It's obvious that God's working in the story, isn't it? I mean, you can see that this is a changed group of men, that God is working in their two lives. And I think the fact that they're willing to give up so generously is a sign of that. You know, so many of the conflicts that we deal with in our life have to do with money. Am I right? They say that's one of the top reasons why there's conflict in marriage. I find even with siblings that's a very high cause, conflict over money, even amongst friends and coworkers. Often the issue that we're fighting over is money. And when it comes to Jacob and Esau, now it's not just money because there's more to their birthright than that, but a big part of it is money and power and influence. And that's what they were fighting over. On top of that, the promise of God, of course. But a lot of it had to do with money. And one of the sure signs, one of the tangible signs that you're willing to see reconciliation is generosity. You have to ask yourself, you really do, you have to ask yourself, is the fight worth whatever we're fighting over? I find a lot of times the things that we fight over, it's not worth it. We would be better off if like Esau, we would just give it up. Honestly, we'd be better off if like Esau, we would look at whoever we're in conflict with and we'd say, you know what? You can just have it. You can just have it. Because the truth is, oftentimes the things we're fighting over is not worth the mental stress, the headache, and the broken relationship that we're in the middle of. Now, sometimes it is. I know there are times where there's very serious conflict. I'm not saying there's no exception. But oftentimes, I don't think that it is. I know some of you have shared with me various points of conflict. My advice is almost always just give it up. If you're fighting over something, unless you can't, I would just tell you, just give it up. Just let them have it. It's the quickest way to resolve conflict. It's what Esau was willing to do. If you're in Jacob's shoes, we have to repay what we've taken. If we've stolen from someone, we have to be willing to give it back. It's a quick way to reconciliation. If we've lost the trust of someone or lost our integrity because of how we acted with someone, we have to work to re-earn that. It works both ways in reconciliation. You have to be willing to give things up, and you have to be willing to repay wrongs. And both these brothers are willing to do that. One of them is willing to give up his blessing that he had gotten, and the other one returns it. Because of that, they're reconciled. They're reconciled. It's the courage that allows them to come face to face and meet each other and deal with their issue. They were never going to resolve this conflict if they didn't have the courage to meet. And it's really Jacob who had the courage. It's their humility that opens the opportunity to embrace. But ultimately, it's their generosity that actually causes the conflict to be reconciled. That's what reconciles the conflict. They were fighting over their blessing, and because of Jacob and Esau's actions, when they leave this place, they're not fighting over it anymore. They've moved on. You know, these attributes, they're fundamental. There's 3 of them I mentioned: courage, humility, generosity. They're fundamental to finding peace in your life. I find that if you're courageous and you're humble and you're generous and you live that out and that's a part of your life, I believe that you will probably not run into nearly as many conflicts as you might think. You'll quickly resolve them at least. And if you're in the middle of conflict with somebody right now, you're dealing with conflict with somebody in your house or somebody at your workplace, or maybe it's somebody that you haven't talked to in a long time, these attributes, trying to live them out, will be very helpful in how you handle the conflict. Can you be courageous to actually go and talk to the person? Can you be humble in how you approach them? Not telling them about how you're right, not digging up the old wounds, but can you be humble in your approach to them? And can you be generous to them? Maybe it means giving something up. Maybe it means repaying wrongs. Maybe it's just trying, sending something, giving a gift, trying to be generous. It's not easy. I just want to point that out. It's not easy. But if you try these, I think God can work through us, and we can see reconciliation in some of our relationships. Here's the reality. There is no relationship that is beyond reconciliation if God is working in our life. You look at the story of Jacob and Esau. These are 2 guys that were literally about to kill each other. They're about to kill each other. And because God is working in their life, there's reconciliation between them. Last week, I shared a story about my stepfather. And growing up, that I had a very difficult relationship with my stepfather. It was an abusive relationship. It was not a healthy relationship. And for most of my childhood, we were in conflict until I had left. One of the most miraculous events in my life, and one of the most amazing events in my life, was when I was in Bible college. I had gone back home to visit my mother. And lo and behold, God had been working in my heart, and God had been working in his heart at the same time. And it was a very strange encounter, but as I was leaving the house, he came out and he talked to me and he apologized to me and he told me he loved me and he hugged me. And it was very weird. It was awkward. It was uncomfortable because of our history, but it was amazing and it was really good. And for me, and I look back, and I'm not someone has seen many miracles in my life. I do believe that was a miracle, that God could work that out. And honestly, after that day, me and my stepfather did not become friends. As a matter of fact, I don't really know him anymore, and I don't know what he's doing. I just don't know. We didn't become friends. We didn't become best buddies. We went our separate ways. But when we left that time, our conflict had been resolved. I'd forgiven him. And he'd forgiven me for some of the things that I'd done. And that's the nature of conflict, by the way. I think sometimes we hope that we can achieve peace and it will be like it was back in the old days. Well, in Jacob and Esau's case, they don't want it to be like it was in the old days. That's not reality, right? Even the story of Jacob and Esau, it's kind of interesting. And this is something I'm not sure I realized until I had been studying this again. But after the conflict's over, Esau says, hey, I'm going to go ahead. Why don't you meet me up ahead? And Jacob says, sure. And then Jacob goes in another direction. He goes in another direction. Why? I don't know. Maybe he sensed God's calling him somewhere else. Maybe he realizes that even though they're reconciled, it's probably best they live in separate places and keep mind to themselves. But that's the nature of conflict resolution. It's not always perfect, but it's peaceful and it's good. And until the Lord Jesus comes back, and until he comes back and calls us to him and renews the earth, there's going to be conflict, and it's going to be challenging, and it's going to be messy. There's a mystery in this story, and I just want to highlight it very quickly because I know for some of us, here's the deal. You can be courageous, you can be humble, you can be generous. God can be working in your life in an amazing way. And you can go into a conflict with someone you love dearly, and you can pray about it, and you can want it to be fixed, and it could be the cause of great stress in your life, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. The conflict is not resolved. The person is not changed. And the reason for that, the mystery of conflict resolution, is the other person. There's a mystery in the story. That mystery is Esau. We have no idea what is going on in Esau's heart. We have no idea what's going on in Esau's life. We have not gotten Esau's story because this is the story of Jacob. It's the story of God's people, and God's people are going to come through Jacob, Israel. So that's why it tells us his story. All we know is that the two brothers embraced, that they were reconciled. It seems like God was working in Esau's life as well. It seems like that. But we have no idea. And that's the nature of conflict resolution. It doesn't always go the way that we want it to. The world we live in is a sinful world. That's why there's conflict. And God can work in our lives, but that doesn't mean he was going to work in their life. That's the reality of it. But, it doesn't really matter whether or not the outcome will be the way that we want it to. God calls us to be a people of peace. And he calls us to try and bring reconciliation to the conflict that we're in. You ever think about this? God is a God of reconciliation. He's a God of reconciliation. The story in Jacob and Esau is more than just a story about two brothers that hug at the end. The story of Jacob and Esau is a part of a much bigger story in which God is reconciling us with him. Through the line of Jacob. The descendant of Jacob is Jesus Christ. And Jesus on the cross will die and pay for our sin. And think about that just for a minute. The scriptures say that we have a broken relationship with God because of our sin. There's a conflict between us and God, and we're the cause of that conflict. We are the ones that have done something wrong. You think about all the arguments that you have, and that person's right and this person's right. We're the wrong ones in that argument, in that conflict. And yet God is the one who reconciles us. God is the offended party, and he's the one that fixes. He brings peace to the relationship through Jesus Christ. And if we believe in Jesus, we can be reconciled to God. We can have peace with God. We can be in relationship with God. Jesus is called the Prince of Peace. And would you believe it that Jesus told us to be peacemakers? This is the calling of God in our lives. The reality is there will not always be peace. Jesus will have to return, and the new earth will have to begin, and judgment will have to come before there is peace. In the end, there will be peace. The prophet predicts that even the animals will be at peace with each other. But that's when we'll have peace. Our job here on earth now is to bring peace into the conflicts of our life. To have peace with each other, to have peace in our family, peace with our coworkers. There's a calling in our life to be like Jacob and Esau, to try and reconcile with those that we have conflict with, and to try and help others to reconcile, both with God and with each other. I want to close just by reading you a teaching that Jesus shared. It's from the Sermon on the Mount, and it's Matthew 5:23 and 24, and I'm paraphrasing just a little bit, just so you know. This is Jesus. He said, so if you're on your way to worship God at Grace Church, and suddenly you remember that someone has something against you, leave worship during the 5-minute break. Go and be reconciled to that person. Go and be reconciled to that person. Then come back and worship. We serve a God of reconciliation. Thank the Lord. The only reason we know him is because he has reconciled us. And he calls us to be peacemakers, to be a people who bring reconciliation into the broken relationships of our life. It's not easy. It's hard. But God calls us to be courageous people, to be humble people, to be generous people, and to try and find peace in the relationships around us. And I would challenge all of us here when we leave this place to try to bring healing and peace to the broken relationships around us. Will you pray with me? Lord God, we rejoice that you are a God of peace, that you are a God of reconciliation, that you have rescued us. We did not deserve it. We did not seek it. We did not earn it. You have given it to us. And what an incredible blessing by grace that we have. Lord, we come to you with so many broken relationships around us. Some of us are wrestling with family and friends and coworkers, and the fights that we have are just so messy and so messed up. And there's pain and there's hurt and there's sin and there's a history to so much of it. And yet, God, we ask that you would bring peace to where there's brokenness. Like Jacob and Esau, Lord, we just ask that we could achieve some of that peace in our life. That with people that we have been divided from, that we might be able to embrace them. That we might be able to live our life faithful to your calling, in peace with our brothers and sisters and our friends. Lord, give us the courage to live this type of life out. Help us to be humble as your son was humble in our approach to conflict. And God, help us to be generous. Like Jacob, we've been blessed so richly. Lord, help us to let go of the things that we have, to fix broken relationships, and to be a people of peace. God, help us to be peacemakers in this world. We read the news and we hear about our community, and the same conflicts that we see in our lives, it seems like they're multiplied in this world today. But you've put us here for a purpose. You've put us here for a reason. And that's to bring the peace of your gospel to this community and to the world. Lord, may we be your people, and may we be a people of peace. We pray this in your Son's name. Amen.